When my son Marcus told me I didn't belong at his Harvard graduation because I'd embarrass him in front of his girlfriend's sophisticated parents, I smiled, hung up the phone, and made one call to my financial advisor. By the time graduation day arrived, I had donated his entire $150,000 trust fund to community college scholarships for single mothers. And that was just the beginning of my plan. Justice must be restored and arrogance punished. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in March 4 years ago. I remember because I was between clients at the salon, my hands still smelling of perm solution, when Marcus burst through the door waving that cream-colored envelope like it was made of gold. Mom, you're not going to believe this!" His face was radiant, transformed by pure joy in a way I hadn't seen since he was 12 and made varsity soccer as the youngest kid on the team. Harvard University! The Crimson Shield logo seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights of sheer perfection, the little salon I'd owned for 15 years in South Boston. Around us, Mrs. Patterson sat under the dryer reading People magazine, and Teresa was touching up Mr. Rodriguez's gray roots. But in that moment, it felt like the whole world had stopped to witness this miracle. "Harvard, baby," I whispered, my voice catching. "Harvard wants my son." The tears came before I could stop them. Happy tears. Proud tears, the kind of tears that come when 20 years of sacrifice suddenly make perfect sense. Every double shift I'd worked at the diner while Marcus slept, every time I'd chosen store-brand groceries so he could have name-brand school supplies, every Christmas morning when his pile of presents was bigger than mine, every birthday when I gave him experiences instead of giving myself rest. Marcus hugged me tight, and I could smell his cologne, the expensive kind I'd bought him for his 18th birthday, even though it cost more than I usually spent on myself in a month. "I did it, Mom. We did it." We did it. Those words meant everything to me, because it really had been we. Just the two of us, against the world, since his father walked out when Marcus was 8, leaving behind nothing but empty beer bottles and a pile of unpaid bills. I pulled back to look at my son, this brilliant, beautiful young man who'd somehow grown from the scared little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. At 18, Marcus stood 6 feet tall, with my dark eyes, and his father's stubborn chin, but none of his father's weakness. This boy had earned a 4.2 GPA while working 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore. This boy had scored in the 99th percentile on his SATs with prep books I'd bought used on eBay. This boy was going to Harvard. "The financial aid package isn't everything," Marcus said, his joy dimming slightly as reality set in. "It's going to be expensive, Mom, really expensive. I don't want you to—" "Stop right there," I interrupted, taking his hands in mine. These hands that had cut and styled thousands of hair of heads, that had worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, that had counted pennies and saved every dollar I could scrape together. $150,000, I said, spreading the statements across my workstation. "I've been saving since you were 6 years old. It was supposed to be for college, but I figured state school, maybe community college first to save money. But Harvard, Marcus? This is what dreams are made of." His eyes went wide as he looked at the numbers. "Mom, this is your retirement money. This is everything you have." "This is everything I've ever wanted," I corrected him. "You think I worked 3 jobs for 15 years so I could have a nice retirement? Baby, you are my retirement. Your success is my success. Your dreams are my dreams." He started crying then, the ugly kind of crying that comes from overwhelming gratitude and love. I held him there in my salon, surrounded by the tools of my trade, the humble business that had somehow produced enough to send a kid to the most prestigious university in the country. "I'm gonna make you so proud, Mom," he whispered against my shoulder. "I'm gonna study business, maybe law. I'm gonna make something of myself. I'm gonna pay you back for everything." "You already have, baby. You already have." The next 4 years passed in a blur of tuition payments, care packages, and phone calls. $70,000 per year in tuition and fees, another $15,000 annually for room and board, books, supplies, travel expenses, emergency funds for when his laptop died or when he needed a suit for an internship interview. By my calculations, I'd invested $280,000 in Marcus's Harvard education. $280,000, more than I'd paid for my house, more than I'd made in some entire years when the economy was bad and clients were scarce. I refinanced my mortgage twice to cover the costs. I sold my car and bought a 15-year-old Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on it. I stopped getting my own hair done professionally, learning to cut and color it myself in my bathroom mirror. But every sacrifice was worth it when Marcus called home, excited about a professor who'd taken interest in his work, or when he sent me photos from the Harvard Business School library where he spent most of his time. My son, my brilliant son, studying among the best and brightest in the world. "Mom, you wouldn't believe the connections I'm making here," he'd tell me during our Sunday phone calls. "My roommate's dad is a federal judge. My study partner's family owns hotels all over Europe. These people, they're gonna be running companies, making policies, changing the world." I loved hearing the excitement in his voice, but sometimes I noticed something else creeping in. A certain way he pronounced words now, more crisp and precise. The way he'd started saying summer instead of vacation, and networking instead of making friends. Small changes, but changes nonetheless. "That's wonderful, baby," I'd always say. "You belong there. You earned your place at that table." And I believed it. Marcus had worked harder than any of those Silver Spoon kids to get where he was. While they were taking family trips to Europe, Marcus had been stocking shelves at the grocery store. While they were attending prep schools that cost more than my annual income, Marcus had been studying by the light of his phone when our electricity got cut off that winter, when the salon's heating bill was more than I'd budgeted for. As graduation approached, I started planning my trip to Cambridge. I'd never been to Massachusetts. Never been anywhere, really, except for a one-weekend trip to New York when Marcus was 12, and I'd saved up for a year to take him to see the Statue of Liberty. But this was different. This was Harvard. This was my son's moment of triumph, and I was going to be there to witness it. I booked a hotel room 3 months in advance, a modest place, about 20 minutes from campus, that cost more per night than I usually spend on groceries in a week. I bought a new dress, navy blue, with small white flowers, conservative and respectful. I got my hair done at a competitor's salon because I wanted to look my absolute best. I even bought new shoes, low heels that wouldn't embarrass Marcus by being too casual. 2 weeks before graduation, I called Marcus to finalize our plans. "I'm so excited, baby," I said, sitting in my living room with my laptop open, looking at the hotel confirmation and my printed boarding pass. "I've got everything arranged. My flight gets in Friday afternoon, and I thought maybe we could have dinner together before the ceremony on Saturday, just the two of us, to celebrate." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a long pause that made my stomach tighten with worry. "Mom?"
"We need to talk." The tone in Marcus's voice sent ice through my veins. In 4 years of Harvard phone calls, through every stress and anxiety of college life, I'd never heard him sound like this. Distant. Formal. Like he was speaking to a stranger, instead of the woman who'd given him everything. "What is it, honey?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. "Is everything okay? Are you sick? Do you need money for something?" "No, Mom, I'm fine. It's just—" Another pause. I could hear voices in the background, muffled conversations and laughter. Probably his roommates, the judge's son and the hotel heiress's kid, living their carefree lives. "Look, this is really difficult to say." My heart started pounding. Marcus, you're scaring me. Just tell me what's wrong. It's about graduation. About you coming to graduation. The words hit me like cold water. What about it? I've already booked everything. The hotel, the flight. I took the whole weekend off from the salon, which you know isn't easy during prom season. That's just it, Mom. I don't think it's a good idea for you to come. The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at my laptop screen, at the hotel reservation with my name on it, at the boarding pass that suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I don't understand, I said slowly. This is your graduation from Harvard. Why wouldn't you want your mother there? It's complicated. His voice was getting smaller, like he was physically shrinking away from this conversation. See, Chloe's parents are flying in from Connecticut, Dr. and Mrs. Whitman. They're very prominent people. Her father is chief of surgery at Yale New Haven Hospital, and her mother is on the board of several important charities. They've been really generous to me, treating me like family. Chloe, the girlfriend he'd been dating for 8 months, the one whose Instagram was full of pictures from ski trips to Aspen and summers in the Hamptons, the one whose casual outfit probably cost more than I made in a month. That's nice, honey, but I still don't understand why that means I can't come to your graduation. Another pause. When Marcus spoke again, his words came out in a rush, like he was ripping off a bandage. Mom, Dr. and Mrs. Whitman are Ivy League people. They summer in Martha's Vineyard. They know senators and Supreme Court justices. They're used to a certain atmosphere, a certain level of sophistication, and honestly, you'd feel out of place, and I don't want them to think, you know. The words hung in the air like poison gas, slowly filling my lungs and choking me. I don't want them to think, what, Marcus? It's not personal, Mom. It's just that you don't understand that world. The conversations, the social expectations, the way people interact at these events, it would be uncomfortable for everyone involved. Each word was a knife. Not personal? How could it be more personal? Let me get this straight, I said, my voice deadly calm. You don't want your mother at your graduation because I might embarrass you in front of your girlfriend's rich parents. Don't make it sound like that. You're making it sound worse than it is. How is it, Marcus? Explain to me how it is. I could hear him breathing, searching for words that would somehow make this betrayal sound reasonable. Look, Mom, you've never been to anything like this. These people, they went to boarding school. They have summer houses. They speak French. Dr. Whitman went to Princeton and Harvard Medical School. Mrs. Whitman has a master's degree from Columbia. They discuss literature and politics and art. They know which fork to use for each course. They just operate on a different level. And what level do I operate on, Marcus? You know what I mean. No, I don't. Tell me exactly what you mean. The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. You're a hairdresser, Mom. You work with your hands. You didn't go to college. You don't know about wine or classical music or European history. When you talk, you sound like you're from Southie. And that's fine. It's who you are, but it's not the image I need to project right now. The image you need to project. I stood up from my couch and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the small backyard where Marcus used to play catch with himself against the fence because I couldn't afford Little League. The fence I'd painted myself 3 summers ago because we couldn't afford to hire someone. The garden where I grew vegetables to save money on groceries. The image you need to project, I repeated slowly. And what image is that? Someone who belongs in their world, someone who can hold his own in conversations about important things, someone whose family background won't be a liability when I'm trying to build my career. A liability. His mother was a liability. I see. And how long have you felt this way about me, Marcus? About your liability of a mother? Mom, don't. How long? Have you been ashamed of the woman who worked 3 jobs to put you through Harvard? I'm not ashamed of you. I'm grateful for everything you've done, but gratitude doesn't change reality. These people expect a certain caliber of family. They expect sophistication and education and cultural refinement. They expect people who understand their world. Their world? The world that my $280,000 bought you entrance to? Silence. Yes, Marcus, I know exactly how much I've spent on your Harvard education. Every tuition payment, every dorm fee, every emergency fund transfer when you needed money for books or clothes or to join some club that would help you network with the right kind of people. $280,000 of my life savings, my retirement fund, my emergency money, gone. Gone so you could learn to be ashamed of where you came from. That's not fair. What's not fair is a son telling a mother that she's not good enough to attend her graduation. What's not fair is forgetting that the same hands you're ashamed of are the hands that signed every check that made this possible. I could hear voices in the background getting louder. Someone was calling Marcus's name, probably wanting him to join them for dinner at some restaurant I'd never heard of, paid for with money they'd never had to work for. Look, Mom, I have to go. We're meeting Chloe's parents for dinner at Harvest. It's this really exclusive place in Harvard Square. We can celebrate together some other time, okay? Maybe the weekend after graduation, just the 2 of us. We can go to that Italian place you like in the North End. That Italian place I like. Like I was some simple woman who could be pacified with cheap pasta and red sauce after being excluded from the most important day of my son's life. Marcus, I said, my voice steady as stone, do you remember what you said to me 4 years ago? When that acceptance letter came? When you were crying in my salon? Mom, you said, we did it. You said we did it together. You said you were going to make me proud. You have made me proud. I'm graduating from Harvard with honors. I'm going to graduate school. I am going to be successful. You're right. You have made me proud. But right now, Marcus, I'm not sure I even know who you are anymore. What's that supposed to mean? I looked around my modest kitchen at the refrigerator covered with Marcus's honor roll certificates from high school, at the framed photo of him in his Harvard sweatshirt that I'd bought him for Christmas freshman year, at the woman in the reflection of the window, the woman who'd sacrificed everything for a son who no longer wanted her in his life. It means I'm going to respect your wishes, Marcus. I won't come to your graduation. I won't embarrass you in front of the Whitmans. I won't be a liability to your image. Mom, thank you for understanding. I knew you'd... But understand this, I continued, my voice cutting through his relief like a blade. Actions have consequences, and disrespect has a price. What does that mean? It means I love you, Marcus. I will always love you, but love doesn't mean I have to accept being treated like an embarrassment. Love doesn't mean I have to pretend this conversation never happened. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you that respect is earned, not inherited. And right now, son, you've got some work to do. I hung up the phone before he could respond. For a long moment, I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the silence of my small house, holding my phone like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Then I walked to my laptop, canceled my hotel reservation, and called the airline to cancel my flight. The customer service representative was sympathetic when I explained there had been a family emergency. She was kind enough to process the cancellation without charging me the usual fees. Family emergency. That's one way to put it. Then I opened my laptop and began researching something I never thought I'd need to know about: how to change the beneficiary on a trust fund. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with every financial document I'd accumulated over the past 4 years spread out in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. bank statements, tuition receipts, canceled checks, credit card bills, loan documents. The paper trail of a mother's love measured in dollars and cents. The first payment, $17,500 for Marcus's freshman year deposit and first semester housing. I'd written that check in July, 4 years ago, using money from my Christmas fund and the small inheritance I'd gotten when my own mother passed away. Fall 2020, $35,250 for tuition and fees. I'd taken out a home equity loan against my house. Spring 2021, another $35,250. I'd worked every Sunday for 6 months straight, giving up my only day off to earn the extra money from wedding bookings. Summer 2021, $3,200 for a summer business program that Marcus said was essential for his networking. I'd sold my mother's jewelry, the little sapphire ring and pearl earrings that were the only valuable things she'd left me. Fall 2021, spring 2022, fall 2022, spring 2023, fall 2023, spring 2024. Semester after semester of payments, each one representing weeks of double shifts, months of choosing store-brand everything, years of telling myself that new winter coats and dental work could wait. I pulled out my calculator and started adding. Tuition and fees, $282,000 over 4 years. Room and board, $60,000. Books and supplies, $4,800. Personal expenses, $8,000. Emergency funds, $6,200. Travel expenses for internships, $3,500. Professional wardrobe, $2,800. Technology upgrades, $3,200. The total came to $370,500. $370,500. I stared at that number until it blurred. That was more than my house was worth. That was more than I'd made in the last 6 years combined. That was my entire adult life's work converted into an education for a son who was now too embarrassed to have me witness the fruits of that investment. But the trust fund, that was different. That was the $150,000 I'd set aside for Marcus's future beyond Harvard. Graduate school, house down payment, startup capital for his own business, whatever path he chose after graduation. That money sat in a separate account, earning modest interest, waiting for Marcus to need it. Marcus didn't know about the trust fund yet. It was going to be my graduation surprise, the cherry on top of 4 years of financial support. Congratulations, baby. Here's $150,000 to help you build your adult life. Not anymore. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking portal. The trust fund account showed a balance of $157,842.33, including the interest it had earned over the years. Enough for a full ride at most graduate schools. Enough for a down payment on a nice house in a good neighborhood. Enough to give a young man a significant head start in life. Enough to teach a very important lesson about gratitude and respect. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Dr. Sarah Chen, my financial advisor at First National Bank. Sarah and I had been working together for 8 years, ever since I'd first opened the college savings account for Marcus. She'd helping navigate the complexities of education funding, tax advantages, and long-term savings strategies. It was 11:30 p.m., too late to call, but I sent her an email asking for an appointment the next morning. The subject line read, "Urgent, need to discuss trust fund changes." Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I poured myself a glass of wine, a nice bottle of Pinot Grigio that a client had given me for Christmas, and that I had been saving for a special occasion. Tonight felt special enough. As I sipped the wine, I thought about Marcus's words. "You don't understand that world. These people expect sophistication and education and cultural refinement. You sound like you're from Southie." He was right about one thing. I was from Southie, South Boston, where my grandmother raised 4 children in a 3-bedroom apartment while my grandfather worked the docks. Where my mother cleaned office buildings at night so she could be home when I got out of school. Where I learned that you work hard, you treat people with respect, and you never forget where you came from. Apparently, that last lesson hadn't taken with Marcus. I walked to my living room and looked at the gallery wall I'd created over the years. Photos of Marcus at every stage of his life. First day of kindergarten, Little League, middle school science fair, high school graduation, his first day at Harvard. In every photo, his smile was genuine, his eyes bright with possibility and love. When had that changed? When had my son started seeing me as a liability instead of the person who had made his dreams possible? I thought about Chloe, the girlfriend whose parents were too sophisticated for my presence. I'd never met her, but I'd seen her in Marcus's social media posts. Blonde, perfectly groomed, always dressed in clothes that cost more than my mortgage payment. The kind of girl who'd never worked a day in her life, who'd never even been inside a salon like mine. And now Marcus wanted to be part of her world. The world where mothers, like me, didn't exist, or at least weren't acknowledged in polite company. My phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus. Mom, I know tonight was difficult, but I hope you understand I'm just trying to do what's best for my future. I love you and I'm grateful for everything. We'll definitely celebrate together soon. Maybe you could visit Boston sometime after graduation and I could show you around Harvard. You'd really like it there. Show me around Harvard? Like I was a tourist who might be impressed by buildings my money had paid him to study in? I set the phone aside without responding and opened my laptop again. This time, I started researching something that made me smile for the first time all day. Scholarship programs for single mothers returning to education. Boston Community College had a program called Second Chances for women over 30 who wanted to complete their education while balancing work and family responsibilities. The testimonials on their website were incredible. Women who'd gone from minimum wage jobs to nursing, accounting, social work, teaching. Women who transformed their lives and their families' futures through education. Women like me, if I'd had the opportunity 30 years ago. Northeastern University's continuing education program offered scholarships for non-traditional students from underserved communities. Their success stories featured women who'd become business owners, counselors, administrators, leaders in their fields. The more I read, the more excited I became. Not for myself. I was 53 years old, set in my career, comfortable with my life, but for all the young women out there who were in the position I'd been in at 22. Single mothers working multiple jobs, dreaming of something better for themselves and their children, but unable to afford the education that could make those dreams reality. What if Marcus's trust fund could change dozens of lives instead of just making his already privileged life a little easier? What if $150,000 could send 20 women to community college or provide full scholarships for 10 students to complete their associate's degrees? What if my son's embarrassment of his mother could be transformed into opportunity for mothers who'd never been embarrassed of their children? I finished my wine and went to bed, but not to sleep. I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, thinking about justice and consequences and the difference between enabling someone and empowering them. Marcus thought he understood sophistication, thought he knew what class really meant. Tomorrow, I was going to show him that real class isn't about which fork you use or whether you went to boarding school. Real class is about lifting others up, not looking down on where you came from. Real sophistication is using your advantages to help people who haven't had the same opportunities. And real education includes learning that respect isn't contingent on social status. My son was about to get the most valuable lesson of his Harvard career, and it wasn't going to cost him a dime. It was going to cost him $150,000.
I woke up at 5:30 a.m., which wasn't unusual for me. Years of opening the salon early had trained my body to rise before dawn. But this morning felt different. This morning, I woke with the clarity that comes after a sleepless night of important decisions. By 6 a.m., I was dressed and sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, waiting for Dr. Sarah Chen to arrive at her office. The financial district didn't wake up as early as hairdressers, but I knew Sarah was usually at her desk by 7:30.
At exactly 7:32, my phone rang. Janet, I got your email. Is everything all right? Dr. Chen's voice carried the concern of someone who'd watched me carefully manage every dollar for 8 years, who knew that urgent wasn't a word I used lightly. I need to make some changes to Marcus's trust fund, I said without preamble. Can you see me this morning? Of course. How about 9 a.m.? I can clear my schedule. I'll be there. At 8:45, I was sitting in the reception area of First National Bank's Wealth Management Division, a place that always made me feel slightly out of place with its marble floors and oil paintings. But this morning, I felt different. This morning, I belonged here as much as anyone else because this was my money we were discussing, earned with my hands and my work and my sacrifice. Dr. Chen greeted me with the warm professionalism I'd come to appreciate over the years. In her early 40s, she was one of the few financial advisors who'd never made me feel stupid for asking questions or uncertain about investment strategies. She'd guided me through college savings plans, retirement planning, and the complex world of education funding with patience and respect. Janet, you look like you haven't slept. What's going on with Marcus's trust fund? I told her everything. The phone call, the graduation exclusion, the embarrassment Marcus felt about his hairdresser mother. Dr. Chen listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. I'm so sorry, Janet. That must have been incredibly hurtful. It was, but more than hurt, I'm disappointed. I raised him better than this, Sarah, or at least I thought I did. So what changes do you want to make to the trust fund? I pulled out a folder I'd prepared that morning filled with printed pages from various scholarship websites and education programs. I want to donate it. All of it, to scholarship programs for single mothers who want to go back to school. Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. That's a significant decision, Janet. This is $157,000 we're talking about. Are you sure you want to move this quickly? Maybe you should take some time to think it over, wait until emotions settle. My emotions aren't clouding my judgment, Sarah. They're clarifying it. I've spent the last 4 years investing in my son's education, hoping it would make him a better person, not just a more successful one. But education without character is just expensive training. I opened my folder and spread out the research I had done. Look at these programs. The Second Chances Scholarship at Boston Community College, the Single Mothers Initiative at Northeastern, the Women's Education Fund at Bunker Hill Community College. These are programs that help women like I was 30 years ago, working multiple jobs, raising children alone, dreaming of something better but unable to afford the education that could make it happen. Dr. Chen picked up one of the brochures, scanning the testimonials and success stories. These are impressive programs. $157,000 could provide full scholarships for about 40 women to complete associate degrees at community colleges, or partial scholarships for twice that many. Imagine the ripple effect, Sarah. 40 women who become nurses, teachers, accountants, social workers. 40 families whose lives are transformed. Hundreds of children who see their mothers achieve their dreams and know that education is possible for them, too. And Marcus, have you thought about how this will affect him? I leaned back in my chair, considering the question. Marcus is graduating from Harvard with honors. He's intelligent, educated, and privileged. He has connections, opportunities, and advantages that most people never dream of. He doesn't need my money to succeed. He needs my values, which, apparently, I failed to instill properly. But graduate school is expensive. A house down payment, startup capital for a business. Marcus can get student loans like millions of other people do. He can save for a house down payment like I did. He can build his business the way I built mine, through hard work and sacrifice. What he can't do is continue taking my financial support while treating me like an embarrassment. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. I understand your reasoning, Janet, but legally, I have to ask, are you doing this to punish Marcus or to help these women? It was a fair question, and I'd been asking myself the same thing all night. Both, I said honestly. I won't pretend this isn't about teaching Marcus a lesson, but if it were only about punishment, I'd just close the account and keep the money. This is about showing him what his education should have taught him, that privilege comes with responsibility, that success should be used to lift others up, and that real sophistication means remembering where you came from. I pulled out a specific brochure and placed it in front of Dr. Chen. I want to establish the Maria Santos Memorial Scholarship Fund. Maria Santos had been my mother's name, the woman who'd cleaned office buildings to keep me in school, who died when Marcus was 15, who'd never lived to see her grandson get into Harvard. The scholarship will be specifically for single mothers in the Boston area who are pursuing associate degrees in practical fields, nursing, education, business administration, computer technology, fields that lead directly to career advancement and family stability. Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment, reading through the materials I had brought. Finally, she looked up at me with something that might have been admiration. "Janet, in 8 years of working together, I've watched you make countless sacrifices for Marcus's future. This might be the most important one yet." "Why?" "Because you're sacrificing your need to be needed. You're choosing to help people who can't repay you instead of continuing to support someone who takes your help for granted. That takes real strength." I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time since Marcus's phone call. "I love my son, Sarah. I will always love him, but love without boundaries isn't love, it's enabling. And I've been enabling his entitlement instead of encouraging his character." "How do you want to structure this?" "I want it set up so that the scholarship recipients are announced at a public ceremony. I want local media coverage. I want people to know that this money came from a hairdresser from Saudi who believes that education should create character, not just careers." Dr. Chen was taking notes, but she looked up at me with curiosity. "Janet, you want publicity? That's not usually your style." "It's not about me. It's about the message. I want every privileged young person in Boston to see that real success means using your advantages to help others. I want every working mother to know that someone understands their struggle and believes in their potential. And yes, I want Marcus to see it in the newspapers and realize what he chose to give up when he decided I wasn't sophisticated enough for his graduation." "When do you want to do this?" I looked at my watch. It was 10:15 a.m. on Thursday. Marcus's graduation was Saturday at 10 a.m. "Tomorrow, Friday afternoon. I want the scholarship announcement to run in Saturday's Boston Globe the same day Marcus walks across that stage." Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "Janet, that's less than 24 hours. Setting up a scholarship fund, organizing a press event, coordinating with the colleges. Sarah, you've seen me plan a wedding reception for 200 people with 3 days' notice when a client's original venue fell through. You've watched me reorganize my entire business schedule to accommodate Marcus's emergencies. I've been making impossible things happen for 30 years. This is just the most important impossible thing I've ever done." Dr. Chen smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen for her all morning. "All right, Janet, let's make some calls." The next 3 hours passed in a whirlwind of phone calls, paperwork, and arrangements that would have seemed impossible at 9 a.m., but felt inevitable by noon. Dr. Chen had connections throughout Boston's educational community, and when she explained what we were trying to accomplish, doors opened faster than I had expected. By 2 p.m., we had agreements from 3 community colleges to participate in the Maria Santos Memorial Scholarship Fund. By 3 p.m., the Boston Globe's education reporter was scheduled for a 4 p.m. interview. By 4:30 p.m., we had a venue, the community center in South Boston where I had grown up, where my mother had taken English classes 30 years ago while working multiple jobs and raising me alone. At 5 p.m., I was standing in front of a small crowd of reporters, college administrators, and community members, holding the check that would change everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady despite the magnitude of what I was doing. 31 years ago, I became a single mother with an 8th grade education and a dream of giving my son opportunities I never had. Today, I'm announcing the Maria Santos Memorial Scholarship Fund, established with a $157,000 donation to provide full educational scholarships for single mothers pursuing associate degrees at Boston area community colleges. The cameras flashed as I continued. "This fund is named after my mother, who cleaned office buildings at night so she could be home when I got out of school. She taught me that education is the great equalizer, but only if it teaches us to lift each other up, not to look down on where we came from. I paused, looking directly into the main camera. Too often, we see education as a ladder to climb away from our communities, instead of a tool to strengthen them. Real sophistication isn't about which schools you attended or which social circles you move in. Real class is about using your advantages to create advantages for others. The education reporter from the Globe raised her hand. Mrs. Santos, what inspired you to make this donation now? My son graduates from Harvard tomorrow, I said, feeling the weight of truth in those words. 4 years ago, when he got his acceptance letter, I thought I was investing in his future. Today, I realized I was also investing in the futures of every young woman who dreams of education but can't afford it. This scholarship ensures that 40 mothers will have the opportunity to transform their lives and their children's lives through education. Another reporter called out, "Will you be attending your son's graduation ceremony?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I thought about Marcus, probably getting ready for some pre-graduation dinner with Chloe's sophisticated parents, blissfully unaware that his trust fund was at that moment being transformed into opportunity for women he'd never considered worthy of his attention. I'll be exactly where I belong, I said with a smile, supporting education and celebrating the dreams of hardworking people who refuse to let their circumstances define their limitations. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of perfect May day that made Cambridge look like something from a postcard. I woke up at 5:30, the same time I'd been waking up for 30 years, but this morning felt different. This morning, I wasn't the hairdresser who'd been excluded from her son's graduation. I was Janet Santos, founder of a scholarship fund that would change dozens of lives. The Boston Globe had run the story on the front page of their Metro section. Southie hairdresser donates $157,000 for single mother scholarships. The photo showed me holding the ceremonial check, smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. But it was the sidebar story that made me laugh out loud. Son graduates Harvard, same day mother creates education fund. Some enterprising reporter had done their homework and connected the dots. Marcus Santos, Harvard Business School graduate, son of scholarship founder Janet Santos. The article didn't explicitly state that he'd been excluded from his own graduation ceremony, but the implication was there for anyone who cared to read between the lines. I made myself a proper breakfast, Eggs Benedict, something I'd learned to make for myself since I no longer had to budget every dollar for Marcus's expenses, and read through the dozens of emails that had come in overnight. Women thanking me for the scholarship opportunity, community college administrators wanting to discuss expanding the program, local business owners offering to contribute additional funding, and 3 missed calls from Marcus. I deleted the voicemails without listening to them. At 8:30 a.m., I dressed in the navy blue dress I'd originally bought for Marcus's graduation, the one with small white flowers that looked professional and respectful. I did my hair carefully, styled it the way I'd learned to do in beauty school 30 years ago. I put on the new low-heeled shoes and the small pearl earrings that had been my mother's. Then I drove to Cambridge. Cambridge Yard was buzzing with activity when I arrived at 9 a.m. Families everywhere, dressed in their finest clothes, carrying flowers and cameras, beaming with pride at their graduating seniors. Parents who looked like they belonged here, who had attended similar ceremonies for generations, who never questioned their right to celebrate their children's achievements. I bought a program from a student volunteer and found Marcus's name listed among the business school graduates. Marcus David Santos. There it was in black and white, proof of 4 years and $370,000 worth of investment. My investment. The general admission seating was in the back, behind the reserved sections for families and special guests. I chose a seat with a clear view of the stage, about 20 rows back, and settled in to watch my son graduate from Harvard Business School. At 9:45 a.m., the processional began. Faculty in their colorful academic robes, administrators carrying ceremonial staffs, and finally the graduates themselves. Row after row of young people in caps and gowns, their faces glowing with achievement and possibility. I spotted Marcus in the 3rd row of business school graduates. Even from a distance, I could see his proud posture, his confident smile, the way he carried himself like someone who belonged exactly where he was. He'd earned that confidence, and despite everything that had happened between us, I felt a surge of pride watching him graduate. In the family section, I could see a blonde woman who had to be Chloe, seated next to an older couple that radiated the kind of understated elegance that comes with generational wealth. Dr. and Mrs. Whitman, no doubt, the people for whom Marcus had sacrificed his relationship with his mother. The ceremony proceeded with all the pomp and circumstance Harvard was famous for. Distinguished speakers talked about leadership and responsibility, about using Harvard education to make a positive impact on the world. The irony wasn't lost on me. When they called Marcus's name, he walked across the stage with perfect composure, shook hands with the dean, received his diploma, and smiled for the official photographer. From my seat in general admission, I applauded along with everyone else. He'd done it. My son had graduated from Harvard Business School with honors. The boy I'd raised alone, the young man I'd supported through 4 years of elite education, had achieved something most people only dream of. As the ceremony wound down and families began to gather for photos and celebrations, I made my way toward the area where graduates were reuniting with their loved ones. I wasn't planning to approach Marcus. I'd promised to respect his wishes about not embarrassing him in front of the Whitmans, but I wanted to see him one more time, to witness this moment that my sacrifice had made possible. I was standing about 50 feet away, partially hidden behind a group of other families, when I saw Marcus scanning the crowd anxiously. His head turned left and right, searching faces with growing panic. Chloe was tugging on his arm, trying to get his attention for photos, but Marcus kept looking around like he'd lost something important. She's not here, I heard Marcus say to Chloe, his voice carrying over the crowd noise. Who's not here? Chloe asked, adjusting her designer dress and checking her phone. My mother. She's supposed to be here. She wouldn't miss this. Dr. Whitman approached them with his wife and another couple, all smiles and congratulations. Marcus! Magnificent ceremony. We're so proud of you. Now where's this famous mother of yours? Chloe's told us so much about the woman who made all this possible. My breath caught. Marcus's face went pale. She couldn't make it, Marcus said weakly. Last-minute emergency at her business. Miss Whitten frowned. Oh no, we were so looking forward to meeting her. Chloe showed us that article in this morning's Globe about her scholarship fund. How extraordinary. A hairdresser who donated $157,000 to help single mothers get educated? What an inspiring story. The color drained completely from Marcus's face. What article? Chloe pulled out her phone, swiping quickly. It's right here. Southie hairdresser donates $157,000 for single mother scholarships. Mom, look at this picture. She's beautiful and so poised. Dr. Whitman was reading over Chloe's shoulder. Listen to this quote. Real sophistication isn't about which schools you attended or which social circles you move in. Real class is about using your advantages to create advantages for others. Marcus's hand was shaking as he took Chloe's phone to read the article. I watched his face change as he read, saw the moment when he realized what I'd done with his trust fund, and saw the moment when he understood that his mother had chosen to help 40 strangers instead of securing his financial future. The timing is quite coincidental, isn't it? Ms. Whitman continued cheerfully. She announces the scholarship fund the same day you graduate. What a wonderful way to celebrate your achievement by helping other women achieve their educational dreams. She used the money that was... Marcus couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Whitman clapped him on the shoulder. Used money to transform lives instead of hoarding it? Marcus, I have to say, your mother's values are exactly the kind of character we'd want in our family. When do we get to meet this extraordinary woman? Before Marcus could answer, Chloe gasped, staring at something behind him. Oh my God, Marcus, is that her? Marcus spun around, and his eyes met mine across the crowd. For a moment, time stopped. Mother and son, looking at each other across 20 feet of Harvard Yard and a chasm of hurt and disappointment that felt miles wide. I smiled at him, the same smile I'd given him when he got his acceptance letter 4 years ago, the same smile I'd worn through years of sacrifice and support. Then I lifted my hand in a small wave, turned, and walked away. Behind me, I could hear Dr. Whitman's voice, "Aren't you going to introduce us?" And Marcus's reply, barely audible, I can't. She's too good for me. I was halfway home, sitting in traffic on the Mass Pike, when my phone started ringing. Marcus's name appeared on my dashboard display, and for a moment I considered not answering, but curiosity won out over stubbornness. "Hello, Marcus?" "Mom?" His voice was thick, like he'd been crying. "Mom, please don't hang up." "I'm not going to hang up, honey. Congratulations on your graduation. You looked very handsome up there." "You were there. You came anyway." "Of course I was there. Did you really think I'd miss your graduation from Harvard?" A long pause. I could hear traffic in the background. He was probably walking somewhere quiet to have this conversation, away from the Whitmans. "I saw the article, Mom, the scholarship fund. You gave away my trust fund." "I gave away my money to people who will use it to better their lives and their children's lives, just like I gave my money to you for the past 4 years." "But that was for my future, graduate school, a house, starting a business." "Marcus," I interrupted gently, "your future is whatever you make of it with the education I've already paid for. The trust fund was a gift, not a guarantee, and gifts can be revoked when the recipient demonstrates that they don't deserve them." Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. "Dr. Whitman said you sounded like an extraordinary woman. Mrs. Whitman said your values were exactly what they'd want in their family. Chloe said she was proud to know someone who would sacrifice so much for education." "And what did you say?" "I couldn't say anything, Mom, because I realized that I threw away the most extraordinary woman in my life because I was afraid some rich people might judge me for having a working-class mother." I pulled into a rest area and put the car in park. This conversation deserved my full attention. "Marcus, do you understand why I couldn't come to your graduation as your invited guest?" "Because I'm an ungrateful, entitled brat who forgot where he came from?" "No, baby. Because you asked me not to." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "I don't understand." "You told me I didn't belong in your world. You said I'd be uncomfortable, that you'd embarrass me, that I didn't understand sophisticated people. So I respected your wishes. I stayed away from your world." "But you came anyway." "I came to watch my son graduate from college. I came as a member of the general public, not as someone trying to infiltrate your sophisticated social circle. I came because I'm proud of what you've accomplished, even if I'm disappointed in who you've become." I could hear him crying now, the kind of deep, ugly sobs that come from genuine remorse. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know when I started thinking that success meant leaving you behind." "I do," I said quietly. "It started the first time someone made you feel ashamed of where you came from, and instead of defending your family, you decided it was easier to distance yourself from us." "How do I fix this? How do I make this right?" I thought about that question for a long moment, watching other families drive past on their way home from their children's graduations, families who'd never had to choose between love and social status. You start by understanding that respect isn't something you can take back once it's lost, Marcus. It has to be earned again, from scratch. "Tell me how. Tell me what I need to do." "First, you need to figure out who you really are. Are you Marcus Santos, the young man who worked 2 jobs in high school and earned his way into Harvard through intelligence and determination? Or are you Marcus Whitman by association, someone who needs to hide his background to maintain his social status?" "I'm Marcus Santos. I know that now." "Do you?" Because Marcus Santos would never be ashamed of his mother. Marcus Santos would introduce me to his girlfriend's parents with pride, would tell them about the woman who worked 3 jobs to make his education possible. Marcus Santos would understand that real class isn't about bloodlines or bank accounts, it's about character and integrity. You're right. You're absolutely right. Second, you need to decide what kind of man you want to be going forward. Are you going to use your Harvard education to climb social ladders and impress people who judge others by their economic status? Or are you going to use your advantages to lift up people who haven't had your opportunities? I want to be like you, Mom. I want to be someone who uses success to help others. Then show me, Marcus. Don't tell me, show me. How? I smiled, looking out at the Massachusetts landscape, thinking about the 40 women who would receive scholarships in my mother's name, thinking about the children who would see their mothers graduate from college and know that education was possible for them too. Figure it out, son. You've got a Harvard education now. Use it. After I hung up, I sat in my car for another few minutes, processing the conversation and the entire surreal day. My phone buzzed with a text from Rosa, my next-door neighbor, whose daughter was graduating from community college next week, a celebration I would definitely be attending. Saw the article in the Globe, so proud of you. Can't wait to hear all about it. Dinner tomorrow? Real family, I thought. People who celebrate your successes without conditions, who support your decisions even when they don't fully understand them, who never make you choose between love and respect. I started the car and headed home to South Boston, to my small house with the garden I'd planted myself and the mortgage I could now afford without help. Behind me, Harvard faded in the rearview mirror, along with the version of myself who'd been willing to accept crumbs of affection from someone who should have loved me unconditionally. Tomorrow, I'd go back to work at the salon. I'd cut hair and listen to my clients' stories and build the kind of genuine relationships that money couldn't buy. Next week, I'd attend the first scholarship ceremony and meet some of the women whose lives were about to change. And someday, maybe, Marcus would call me with news that he'd used his Harvard education to make a difference in someone else's life. When that day came, we'd start rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect instead of financial dependence. Until then, I had 40 new reasons to be proud of the choices I'd made. 3 months after graduation, I was in my salon touching up Mrs. Rodriguez's highlights when my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and saw a number I didn't know with a 617 area code. Boston, but not Marcus's number. "Excuse me 1 second, Mrs. Rodriguez," I said, stepping away from my station. "This is Janet." "Miss Santos, this is Dr. Patricia Williams from Boston Community College. I'm the coordinator for the Second Chances program." "Of course, Dr. Williams. How can I help you?" "Well, I'm calling because we have a situation with one of our scholarship recipients, and we could use your advice." I walked to the back of the salon where I could speak privately. "What kind of situation?" "Well, it's actually a positive situation, but an unusual one. One of our Maria Santos Memorial Scholarship recipients, a young woman named Teresa Mendez, has been contacted by a Harvard Business School graduate who wants to mentor her through her accounting program." My heart skipped a beat. A Harvard graduate? Yes, a young man named Marcus Santos. He said he's been following the scholarship program and was moved by Teresa's story. Single mother of 2, working nights at a hotel while taking classes during the day. He's offered to provide additional financial support for her textbooks and transportation costs, and he wants to help her develop a business plan for the accounting firm she hopes to start after graduation. I leaned against the wall, feeling a mixture of pride and surprise that left me temporarily speechless. "Miss Santos, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here. I'm just surprised. This young man, did he mention any connection to the scholarship fund?" "He said he knew you personally and that your work inspired him to use his education to help others. He seems very sincere and his references are impeccable, but we have a policy about thoroughly vetting any mentors who want to work with our students. so I wanted to call you for a reference." I closed my eyes, picturing Marcus making this call, reaching out to help someone whose story probably reminded him of mine 30 years ago. "Dr. Williams, Marcus Santos is my son." "Oh, I had no idea. The surname, of course, but I never made the connection." Marcus is brilliant, hardworking, and until recently, he forgot some important lessons about where success comes from and what it should be used for. If he's reaching out to mentor Teresa, it's because he's remembering those lessons.
So you'd recommend him as a mentor? I thought about the Marcus who'd excluded me from his graduation, and then about the Marcus who was now apparently using his Harvard connections to help a single mother achieve her dreams. "Yes," I said, "I'd recommend him, but with conditions." "What conditions?" "Teresa should never feel indebted to him or like she owes him anything beyond her best effort in school. This should be about her success, not his ego. And if he ever makes her feel like her background is something to be ashamed of or overcome, you call me immediately." "Understood. Thank you, Miss Santos. And thank you again for making the scholarship fund possible. You should know that all 40 of our recipients are doing remarkably well. Your investment is changing lives." After I hung up, I stood in the back of my salon for a few minutes, processing this development. Marcus was mentoring one of my scholarship recipients. He was using his Harvard education and his business contacts to help a single mother build a better life for her children. Maybe he was starting to understand what real sophistication looked like. I returned to Mrs. Rodriguez, whose highlights were processing under the heat lamp. "Everything okay, mija?" she asked in the mixture of Spanish and English that made up the soundtrack of my neighborhood. "Yes," I said, mixing her toner with a smile. "Everything is exactly as it should be." 2 weeks later, I was invited to Teresa Mendez's mid-semester presentation at Boston Community College. She was presenting her business plan for Mendez Accounting Services, financial planning for working families, a firm that would specialize in helping low-income families with tax preparation, budgeting, and small business bookkeeping. I arrived early and took a seat in the small auditorium where about 30 people had gathered. Other scholarship recipients, college faculty, family members, and community supporters. As Teresa began her presentation, I noticed a familiar figure slip in through the back door. Marcus. He looked different than he had at graduation, less polished, more real. He was wearing a nice but not expensive suit, and his hair was a little longer, less corporate. He saw me and nodded, a small, uncertain gesture that I returned with a slight smile. Teresa's presentation was brilliant. She'd identified a gap in financial services for working-class families, developed a business model that was both profitable and socially responsible, and created a 5-year plan for expanding throughout Greater Boston. When she finished, the applause was enthusiastic and genuine. During the reception afterward, I watched Marcus talking with Teresa and her 2 young children, ages 6 and 9. He was crouched down at their level, asking them about school and listening to their answers with the kind of attention that showed he genuinely cared about their responses. "Miss Santos." Teresa appeared beside me, beaming. "I wanted to thank you again for making this possible. The scholarship, the support, everything. It's changed our entire lives." "You changed your own life, Teresa. I just provided a little financial assistance. Your hard work and determination did the rest." "Marcus told me you're his mother. He talks about you all the time, about how proud he is of what you've accomplished." I looked across the room at my son, who was now looking at a drawing one of Teresa's children had made. "Does he?" "He says he taught you that education should make you more humble, not more proud. That real success means lifting others up, not climbing over them." My throat tightened with emotion. "Those are good lessons to remember." He also said he spent the last 3 months trying to become worthy of being your son again. Before I could respond, Marcus approached us, his face uncertain but hopeful. "Mom," he said quietly, "I didn't know you'd be here. Dr. Williams invited me to see how the scholarship recipients are progressing. Teresa's presentation was outstanding."
It was, Marcus agreed, his voice filled with genuine admiration. She's going to be incredibly successful. Teresa excused herself to talk with other guests, leaving Marcus and me standing together for the first time since graduation day. I heard you're mentoring several of the scholarship recipients. 4 of them, actually. Teresa with accounting, Maria with nursing, Sandra with early childhood education, and Carmen with computer technology. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I realized I needed to figure out what my Harvard education was actually for. And what did you decide? It's for opening doors, Mom. Not just for myself, but for people who haven't had the same opportunities. It's for using the connections and knowledge I've gained to create pathways for others. I studied his face, looking for signs of the entitled young man who'd been embarrassed by his hairdresser mother. What I saw instead was someone who looked genuinely humbled and purposeful. That's a good purpose, Marcus. I broke up with Chloe, he said suddenly. 2 months ago. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not, he said with a small smile. And neither am I, really. We wanted different things. She wanted someone who could fit into her parents' world. I wanted to build my own world, one that had room for people like Teresa and Maria and Sandra and Carmen, one that had room for you. Marcus, I know I can't undo what I said, Mom. I can't take back the hurt I caused or the trust I broke. But I'm trying to become the man you raised me to be, instead of the man I thought I needed to be. I looked around the room at the scholarship recipients and their families, at the college faculty who were investing in these women's futures, at the community members who were celebrating education and opportunity. This was my world now, and it was beautiful. What about graduate school, your career plans? I got into the MBA program at Northeastern. I'll be taking classes at night while working during the day at a nonprofit that helps low-income families with financial planning. It's not Harvard Business School, but it's exactly where I need to be. And you're paying for it yourself? Student loans, like millions of other people. It turns out that paying your own way makes you appreciate the education more, not less. I nodded, feeling something that might have been forgiveness starting to bloom in my chest. Marcus, I want you to know that I'm proud of what you're doing now. This is who I always hoped you'd become. His eyes filled with tears. Does this mean you might consider having dinner with me sometime? Not because I need anything from you, but because I miss my mother, and I'd like to try to earn the right to be your son again. I'd like that. But you're paying. He laughed, the genuine laughter I had heard from him in years. Deal. 1 year later, I was standing in the same community center in South Boston where I had announced the Maria Santos Memorial Scholarship Fund. But this time, I wasn't alone. Marcus stood beside me, along with Teresa Mendez, who was now a certified accountant and had just opened her own firm, and 39 other women who'd completed their degrees with scholarship support. The local news cameras were rolling when I stepped up to the microphone for the first annual scholarship celebration and expansion announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, 1 year ago, I announced a scholarship fund with a single donation of $157,000. Today, thanks to the support of local businesses, community members, and dedicated volunteers, I'm proud to announce that the Maria Santos Memorial Scholarship Fund has grown to over $400,000, and we're expanding to serve single mothers throughout Massachusetts. The applause was thunderous. In the front row, I could see Mrs. Rodriguez from my salon, Rosa and her daughter, who'd graduated from community college 6 months ago, and Dr. Chen from the bank, who'd helped coordinate much of the fund's growth. But the real celebration today belongs to these 40 women, I continued, gesturing to the graduates seated on the stage behind me. They've completed associate's degrees in fields ranging from nursing to business administration to information technology. They've maintained high GPAs while working jobs and raising children. They've transformed not just their own lives, but the lives of their families and their communities. I paused, looking out at the audience filled with families, employers who'd hired our graduates, and college administrators who'd supported the program. When I started this fund, I thought I was giving a gift to women who reminded me of myself at their age. But what I discovered is that they gave me something far more valuable in return. They showed me what real success looks like, not the kind of success that separates you from your community, but the kind that lifts your entire community up. As I spoke, I caught sight of Marcus in the audience. He was recording the event on his phone, probably to share on the social media accounts he now used to promote educational opportunities for underserved communities. Over the past year, he'd become one of the scholarship fund's most effective advocates, using his Harvard connections to recruit donors and his business skills to help recipients develop career plans. Today, I want to introduce you to someone who embodies the true purpose of education, I said. Teresa Mendez received one of our first scholarships to study accounting. Today, she owns her own firm, employs 3 people, and has committed to providing free tax preparation services for low-income families throughout Roxbury and South End. Teresa stepped forward, poised and professional in a way that reminded me of myself when I'd first started my salon. She was nervous but determined, the same combination that had carried me through 30 years of small business ownership. Miss Santos gave me more than money for school, Teresa said into the microphone. She gave me permission to dream bigger than I thought possible. A year ago, I was a hotel housekeeper, taking night classes and hoping to maybe work at H&R Block someday. Today, I have my own business and a 5-year plan to expand throughout Massachusetts. She turned to look at me directly. But the most important thing she taught me is that success isn't about leaving your community behind. It's about bringing your community with you. As Teresa spoke about her journey, her business plans, and her commitment to serving working families, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with money or recognition. This was what my mother's life insurance money was meant for. This was the legacy I'd wanted to create. After the formal ceremony, during the reception, Marcus approached me with a young man I didn't recognize. "Mom, I want you to meet someone. This is David Chen, Dr. Chen's nephew. He's starting his senior year at Harvard in the fall, and he wants to follow in your footsteps." David, who couldn't have been more than 21, shook my hand with the kind of respect I'd forgotten was possible from young people. "Miss Santos, Marcus has told me about the scholarship fund and how you've changed so many lives. I'm majoring in education policy, and I want to start a similar program for first-generation college students when I graduate." "That's wonderful, David. What inspired you to focus on education?" He smiled, glancing at Marcus. Actually, it was Marcus's story. He told me about how his mother worked 3 jobs to send him to Harvard, and how he almost lost sight of why that sacrifice mattered. He said the most important lesson he learned wasn't in any classroom. It was watching you turn your disappointment in him into opportunity for others. I looked at Marcus, who was studying his shoes with obvious embarrassment. "Marcus has been talking about me?" "All the time. He speaks at pre-professional events about the importance of staying connected to your community after graduation. He tells students that real leadership means using your advantages to create advantages for others. I think that's a direct quote from you." "It is," Marcus said quietly. "Among other things, you taught me that I forgot for a while." As the reception wound down and families began to leave, Marcus helped me pack up the scholarship materials and promotional displays. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you forgive me? Really forgive me? Not just tolerate me because I'm trying to make amends?" I stopped what I was doing and looked at my son. Over the past year, I'd watched him rebuild his relationship with me through actions rather than words. He'd volunteered hundreds of hours for the scholarship fund, mentored dozens of students, and completely restructured his career goals around service rather than status. Most importantly, he had never once asked me for money or tried to guilt me about the trust fund I'd donated. Marcus, forgiveness isn't something you earn and then possess forever. It's something you have to deserve every day through your choices and your character. His face fell slightly, and I realized he'd misunderstood. What I mean is, you don't need my forgiveness anymore because you're not the same person who hurt me. The Marcus I raised, the one who worked 2 jobs in high school and cried with joy when he got into Harvard, that Marcus never left. He just got buried under expectations and pressure and the desire to fit in where he didn't belong. I reached over and straightened his tie, the same maternal gesture I'd been making since he was 6 years old. The Marcus standing in front of me now is the son I always knew you could become. Successful, yes, but successful in ways that matter. Using your education to lift others up. Proud of where you came from. Committed to making sure other people have the opportunities you've had. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. I love you, Mom, and I'm proud to be your son. I love you too, baby, and I'm proud to be your mother. As we finished packing up, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. 2 years ago, I'd been a hairdresser whose entire identity was wrapped up in sacrificing for a son who'd grown embarrassed of my sacrifices. Today, I was the founder of a scholarship fund that had changed 40 lives and was expanding to change hundreds. Marcus was no longer the entitled young man who'd excluded me from his graduation. He was a Harvard graduate using his education exactly as it should be used, to open doors for others, to bridge communities, to prove that real sophistication comes from character, not credentials. What's next for the fund? Marcus asked as we loaded the last box into my car. We're partnering with 5 more community colleges next year. Dr. Williams thinks we can support 100 scholarship recipients annually within 3 years. And what's next for you? I smiled, thinking about the plans I'd been developing with Rosa and some of the other salon owners in the neighborhood. I'm thinking about going back to school myself, maybe getting a business degree so I can help other working women start their own companies. Teresa's success has me thinking there might be more entrepreneurs in the community who just need mentorship and startup capital. Marcus's face broke into a huge grin. Mom, that's incredible! You'd be amazing at that! Well, I figure if my son can get an MBA while working full-time, my old mom can handle a few business classes. You're not old, and you're definitely not just handling anything. You're going to transform another whole sector of people's lives. As we stood in the parking lot of the community center where my mother had once taken English classes, where I'd announced the scholarship fund, where 40 women had just celebrated achievements that seemed impossible 2 years ago, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Excitement about my own future, not just my son's. Marcus, can I tell you something? Anything. When you excluded me from your graduation, I thought my job as your mother was over. I thought I'd failed at the most important thing I'd ever done. He winced. Mom, let me finish. What I mean now is that my job as your mother wasn't to get you through Harvard. It was to raise a man who would use whatever advantages he gained to help others. A man who would remember where he came from and honor the people who helped him get where he was going. I looked at my son, this young man who'd spent the last year proving he understood what real success meant. You graduating from Harvard made me proud of your intelligence. But watching you mentor Teresa and the other scholarship recipients, seeing you choose nonprofit work over corporate climbing, listening to you speak about community responsibility, that makes me proud of your character. And character matters more than credentials. Marcus hugged me then, right there in the parking lot, the same way he'd hugged me in my salon when his Harvard acceptance letter arrived. But this hug felt different. This wasn't the desperate gratitude of someone who needed my support. This was the genuine affection of a man who'd learned to value what I'd always tried to teach him. Thank you for not giving up on me, he whispered. Thank you for becoming worthy of not giving up on. As we separated and got into our respective cars, I thought about calling Dr. Chen to discuss education loans for myself. For the first time in 30 years, I was going to invest in my own future instead of just subsidizing someone else's dreams. My phone buzzed with a text from Teresa. "Miss Santos, thank you for today. My daughter asked me if I was going to college too when she grows up. I told her she can be anything she wants to be, just like her mama, just like you showed us all." I smiled and started my car. Tomorrow, I'd go back to work at the salon, cutting hair and listening to stories and building the kind of genuine relationships that couldn't be bought with any amount of money. But I'd also start researching business programs and thinking about the next chapter of my own life.
In my rearview mirror, I could see Marcus in his car, probably texting updates about today's event to the network of supporters and advocates he'd built over the past year. My son, using his Harvard education the way I'd always dreamed he would. Not to climb away from his community, but to build bridges back to it. The trust fund I donated had been worth $157,000. The relationships I'd built, the lives I'd changed, the man my son had become, and the woman I was becoming, those were priceless. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that teach you what really matters. And what really matters isn't the size of your bank account or the prestige of your degrees. What really matters is using whatever advantages you have to create advantages for others. What really matters is never forgetting that success without character is just expensive failure. What really matters is raising children who understand that real sophistication comes from lifting people up, not looking down on them. As I drove home through the streets of South Boston, past the neighborhood where I'd grown up, where my mother had sacrificed for me the same way I'd sacrificed for Marcus, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: complete satisfaction with the choices I'd made. The Maria Santos Memorial Scholarship Fund would continue growing, changing lives, creating opportunities for women who reminded me of myself at 22. Marcus would continue using his education the way it was meant to be used, and I would continue building my own dreams, finally, at 54 years old. Not bad for a hairdresser from Southie who learned that sometimes the best gift you can give someone is refusing to enable their worst impulses. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes respect has to be earned. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away from people who don't appreciate your worth, even when one of those people is your own child. But when they learn to appreciate it, when they prove they deserve it, when they show you through their actions that they've remembered the values you tried to teach them, that's when you get your child back. That's when you get your family back. That's when you realize that the best revenge isn't getting even. The best revenge is becoming so successful, so fulfilled, so surrounded by people who value you, that the person who hurt you realizes what they almost lost forever. And then, if they're truly sorry, if they've truly changed, you get to decide whether to let them back into the life you've built without them. I chose to let Marcus back in, but this time, he had to earn his place at my table. This time, respect came first, and love followed. This time, we both knew exactly what we were worth. If you enjoyed this story of justice, family, and the true meaning of success, please like this video and subscribe to Justified Revenge for more tales of people who refuse to let others define their worth. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Janet's situation? Click the notification bell to never miss a story about standing up for yourself and discovering that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to enable their worst behavior. Until next time, remember, real class isn't about where you went to school or how much money you have. Real class is about using whatever advantages you possess to lift others up, not to look down on where you came from. Stay fierce, because every story deserves its moment of justified revenge.